Mike Bub is what you might call a musician's musician. A banjo picker turned bass virtuoso, Mike quickly found work in Nashville when he moved here decades ago. He made his way onto the Opry stage, onto tour buses with bluegrass legends like Bill Monroe, and into recording sessions across the city. Full disclosure, he has also played bass with my husband. He's been a weeknight staple at one of the city's last bastions of old-time music, the revered Station Inn. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner & Company. My husband says, without hesitation, that you are the best bass player he has ever seen, let alone played with. You could be free falling out of a plane and not miss a beat.
Well, that's very kind of him. I might have a little different take on it, but I appreciate that.
So is rhythm inborn, or how do you learn to keep such impeccable time?
Well, it's a musical thing, just like deciding what notes to play and that sort of thing. What's interesting about playing upright bass is you have all these options on how to play a note, let alone choose the note. So you can play it long or you can play it short, and it just changes the way something feels. But those things are all learned through practical experience. It's not, timing and rhythm is sort of a thing you teach it to people, but people have a natural rhythm or they don't, and you can see it in, an audience that doesn't really clap together or whatever, finding a beat. And it's the same musically when people can't really hear when a chord changes or whatever. So some of these things are built in innately, I think. And then the other things you learn beyond what you feel naturally. But, I always say bass playing is about 90% practical experience. And when you get into a group of people, everybody has sort of a different lean to rhythm, Bluegrass is usually very forward-leaning and driving, Jazz is very laid back. You have these longer notes that just sort of set things back a little bit, and you're not as aggressive. So you have to recognize those situations. And again, they come from just practical experience for me because I'm self-taught. I don't have any formal education on the bass. So
would you say you kind of grew up in proximity to show business?
Yes. Yeah. My father went to University of Southern California. Both my mom and dad. My mom went to UCLA. My dad went to USC in Southern California. My dad graduated with a radio and broadcast degree, which now has a new name. I'm not really sure what it is. It's media or whatever you want to call it. But back then it was radio and broadcast. And so in college he interned at NBC and eventually was hired by NBC. All along with this he was in the Navy and was an officer in the Navy. And so he was a good manager of people and a good negotiator. So he was at NBC in the 60s when, sort of Mad Men era.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing on television was Bonanza.
Absolutely.
And so that was their flagship television show on NBC. And my dad went to Lake Tahoe to meet with a guy who had built a theme park called the Ponderosa Ranch, which was built on the Bonanza theme. Basically, they built a town and the Cartwright home and the whole thing. They had it all set up just like the TV show. And that guy ended up hiring my dad away from NBC. And he became a general manager of this theme park called the Ponderosa Ranch. So we left Los Angeles at a very young age. I went up there. And then from there, we lasted there a few years. And then we went to Tucson, Arizona, where they have a theme park and film location called Old Tucson. So a lot of old John Wayne movies were filmed there. So I grew up in those environments, like as a kid, just, dressing in the Western stuff.
So I'm picturing you in a little cowboy suit.
Yep.
How do you become musical? And I know it wasn't the bass to begin with.
Well, when I look back, I sort of see like those were the places where I saw live music the first, When we were in Lake Tahoe, there was a duo that played in the saloon there, and it was a guy with a banjo and a guy with a guitar. So I was first seeing that music in person at a very young age. But my parents were huge music fans, and they had a very diverse record collection. And, of course, they started their family, were married in the 50s, and so they went through all the phases, of music, like the big band era through high school and college, so they had all of the Glenn Miller and the Benny Goodman records, and I loved all that stuff. And then they got into sort of the lounge music of the 50s, which is Martin Denny and that kind of stuff. And then the big folk era came through with the Kingston Trio, and they actually got interested in playing banjo then. And they did some kind of community outreach, banjo lessons at one time. But my dad wasn't really very musical at all. My mom was the real musician between the two of them. And so just through records and music in general, all my siblings played an instrument growing up. My older brother plays piano. My sister played, kind of folky guitar. And then my closest brother played trumpet through high school and stuff. So I was around music, and I was hearing all of this music from my parents' record collection on into my brothers and sister. So I heard everything, but when Dueling Banjos hit the air, which was a huge hit in the early 70s on radio, you would hear it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And that sound of the 5-string banjo is, for some people, is just like a hook, and it just grabs you, and that's what happened to me. And I eventually decided I wanted to learn how to play the banjo in that, Scruggs style. And that's how I got started. I started just taking lessons. Told my mom I want to learn how to play the banjo, and it wasn't foreign to them because they were familiar with the music. They liked it, and so it was one of those, get your room cleaned up and we'll talk about it. So eventually I got to take banjo lessons from a guy who was kind of a folk-a-doke guy. His name was Steve Kelsey, and he had a little guitar studio in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I grew up. That's where I went to high school. And I started just out of the 6th grade. I was about 13, I guess. And he kind of got me as far as he could teach me. And he started taking me to other styles and stuff. I didn't really want that. I really wanted that Scruggs sound. And my sister was at a dinner, like at one of those golf resort hotels there for a business dinner. And they happened to have a bluegrass band playing there. And she got the banjo player's phone number. And I ended up taking lessons from him. A guy named Chris Buechler, still great friends to this day. He was 7 years older than me, and so, he was on his way in a real estate career, but he played the style of banjo that I wanted to learn, and so we just became, just thick as brothers, really, and we went on vacations together and played music together, and all through my high school years. And that's really how I got started.
Were you good from the start, or were you just determined as hell?
Well, I think I had a little, inborn talent because my mother, she grew up in an era where, in the 30s, where everybody took formal music lessons. So she was a great pianist, and she could read sheet music like reading the newspaper. She could her entire life, she could just sit down in front of a piece of music and play it. Kind of like learning how to type kind of thing, like it never leaves you, And my aunt played the harp, her sister. And back in those days, if you took a lesson, or say you take formal piano lessons, you would go to a sheet music store. And there'd be a guy, sheet music, much like album covers, had this beautiful art on it, and you'd say, well, this looks attractively good. And you would hand it to a guy, and he would play it for you. And then if you liked it and you wanted to learn, then you would buy the sheet music and bring it home. That's how she grew up. She never learned how to improvise or how to play by ear. She was always a formally trained player. But anyway, I had some natural ability, hopefully some pitch and some rhythm. But I became obsessed by the banjo, especially in my high school years. It was really all I really wanted to do. So I spent hours and hours and hours playing, practicing, and learning, how to do it.
Your house was noisy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There's no way to play banjo quietly.
Take your pick. You want the banjo or the trumpet?
Oh, yeah.
So my brother got shut down a lot more than I did.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. We'll be right back.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Isn't there like a competition route that these bluegrassers go through?
That's how I started, playing in competitions. That's a lot of the music festivals at that time out in the Southwest were fiddle contests, and then they would also have the other instrument contests as well. And they would base a whole weekend around that,
So you're like an athlete in training.
I guess, yeah. There's certain mindset and there's strategies, if you want to win. Part of it was the community part of it, and my family all went and supported me, and I used to go to this one festival and compete every year. It took me 10 years to win this banjo contest because I kept bringing other friends to it. Oh, you got to come to this festival. And then I would always wind up in I'd be in the top 5 or whatever, but it took me almost 10 years to win.
So once you win, is that your ticket?
Not really, because you can't really make a living doing that. It's not sustainable, but it's just a way to meet more musicians. It's another way to interact and jam with musicians, and it just just fortifies your interest in it because you're going to hear something and go, oh, I need to learn what that guy's doing or that type of thing. So eventually, I decided I wanted to play when I was 18. I went 1 year of college. We found a college in Levelland, Texas, which is 30 miles west of Lubbock. And it was, at that time, was one of 2 colleges that had a country and bluegrass music program. And we had seen something about it on TV. No internet back then, so we were lucky to even find out about it. But as soon as we saw that, oh, there's Banjo U, I'm going, So at that age, graduated high school, 18, and went to college for a year, and I decided I wanted to play. So I ended up answering an ad in Bluegrass Unlimited magazine at 19, and I joined a band in Milwaukee. I auditioned. I sent them a tape, and I ended up moving to Milwaukee. But I had another friend from another band situation that was living back east, and he got me involved in a pretty well-known bluegrass band at the age of 19, a guy named Bob Paisley, who's now passed and gone, but he was from the Mid-Atlantic area, and he was just kind of a stalwart of the bluegrass scene there, and recorded on Rounder Records. And to me, that was, he was like a star,
Yeah.
And his son, Dan Paisley, who's very big in bluegrass now, has won the male vocalist a couple of times. But I worked with them a whole summer, and I went to Japan with them when I was 19. And my parents thought that was the greatest thing in the world. Like, somebody's going to take you to Japan and pay all your expenses? Go. Why would you miss out on that,
And the Japanese are crazy about bluegrass.
Yes. Yeah, they love it.
Why?
They love it. I don't know. It's developed over the years. There was a band that came here in the 70s called Bluegrass 45, and they were, might as well have been working for P.T. Barnum, like a Japanese bluegrass band. Nobody had ever seen anything like that,
Yeah.
So they were on all the festivals in the early 70s, made quite a impression on people. But one of the guys the brothers in the band, the Watanabe brothers, they ended up setting up a business with a guy who owned a record label here, a guy named Dick Freeland, who owned Rebel Records at the time, which is a big bluegrass label. And they became the sole importers of bluegrass music into Japan through their company. And so everything that had anything to do with bluegrass went through their company. And it's still there today. It's called BOM. And they still, the record business has changed so much, but they still produce a magazine every month, a bluegrass magazine, and still distribute instruments and music and everything else. So, through that, I think it kind of really developed. Just that American-made music is really, and of course, the infectious sound of the 5-string banjo played in their style of Earl Scruggs is, it's unstoppable.
Who was the first really famous person you played with? And was it banjo or bass?
I don't, it's hard to say.
Yeah, define fame, I guess, yeah.
Well, when I came to Nashville, I guess it was really what I could say, something like that. I mean, at the time, this is the beginning, as Eddie Stubbs described it, the beginning of the end of the golden age of country music. When I got here, Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl were still opening the Opry on Saturday nights. They've been doing it for 50 years, And to see that and experience that was just amazing to me. And then through those associations, I got to play on stage and be with play with Bill Monroe, and that's what I consider, like the most famous people. I mean, there are famous people, like when I was with Del McCurry, the band Fish invited us to one of their festivals and brought us right out on stage with them in front of 70, 80,000 people, which was completely ridiculous. I don't know how it sounded, but there we were, So those kind of things, they come along with just being in the music, you get thrown into these situations that are just unbelievable sometimes. But I ended up playing Bill Monroe's last road show that he did before he basically came off the road and just played the Opry. He was about 82 at that time, I think, and he ended up having a stroke about 4 months later. But I did the last road performance that he did, which was in Schaumburg, Illinois, in November of 1995. Yeah, we played at college there.
And I know you have a zillion Bill Monroe stories, but regale us with one. I mean, what would the average person not realize about Bill Monroe on the road? Or did he have interesting hobbies?
He was really one of a kind type of guy. He loved to play solitaire and cheat, if you could actually do that. But the first time I ever went with him, Tater Tate, who was his bass player, he was getting up there in years, and he had terrible back problems, and so riding on a bus was difficult for him, and he didn't want to go on these trips anymore. He just wanted to play here in town. So he asked me to go, and I said, okay, I'll love to, And I had met Bill before. Of course, he would never know who I was, but so I'm like, okay, first thing you have to do when you're going to play with Bill Monroe is you have to have a hat. If you don't have a hat, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I asked Jimmy Campbell, who was playing fiddle at the time, I said, man, where should I go? What type of hat do I need to have? And he goes, oh, they probably got some around the office. I said, I'm not going to take a chance on this large head and try to cram it into a small hat. I said, just tell me what kind it is, and I'm going to go get one. So I bought a Resistol Cattleman felt hat. And so I show up at the bus. I just happened to live around the corner from his office at the time, off of Dickerson Road. And I get on the bus, and he's the only one there. There's nobody there but me and him. So I step up on there, and I said, Bill, my name's Mike Bub. I said, we've met before. I play with Del McCurry. And I said, but I'm going to be playing with you this weekend in Tater's place because he's not going to make the trip. And he, without any acknowledgement or anything, he just looked at me and he said, do you have a hat? And I said, yes, sir, I do. He goes, that'd be fine. And that was it. So, I passed the first hurdle. So from that, I was able to play a couple more times with him and do a few more trips. So there was another trip I was on with him. This is my famous Bill Monroe story. So we're riding along, typical tour bus. There's a couch along one window, and on the other side is a table. So he's sort of faced forward, sitting at the table, just looking out the window. And next to me on this couch is his hat, which is a custom-made Charlie One Horse hat that was a gift to him for his 50th anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry. And I'm very aware of the hat. I know it's sitting next to me, but I'm drinking a cup of coffee from a little styrofoam cup. And, I finish the coffee, and whatever is left in the bottom of this cup, it's just a dot of coffee. It's just like a drip, nothing. I go to reach over to put the cup in this cup holder at the end of the couch over the hat, and I'm standing up at the same time. And the bus does one of these floating, things in the road, and it all happened at once, and the cup leaves my hand, does a triple Lindy, and lands on the back brim of that white Charlie One Horse 50th anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry hat that Bill was wearing at the time. And of course, I jump up and I grab the hat, and that tiny little dot of coffee just looked like a big bruise on the back of this hat.
Yeah.
It just soaked across there. And I mean, it was not any coffee at all in there, hardly. So I stand up, and Bill Monroe's like, what have you done? What have you done to my hat? And I said, and my heart just sank to my feet. I didn't know what to do. I'm the new guy, total rookie move. I feel terrible. And he goes, what have you done to my hat? I said, Bill, I am so sorry. I got coffee on your hat. Let me see it. And he looks at it, and all he could do was just look at me and shake his head like, you fool, And that's the way he treated me for the rest of the trip.
Really?
And at the end of the trip, we were coming back, and there used to be a hat maker right here on 8th Avenue. Jew's hats.
Yeah.
Now, Jew was probably in his 80s at that time, and he was a real character. I don't know if you ever got to meet him or go in there, but he made hats for everybody. You get a hat any color, any style, anything you wanted, he could make it. And so I told Bill Monroe, I said, I'll take your hat down to Jew's and get it fixed up for you and get it cleaned up for you before next weekend at the Opry. He goes, I'd really appreciate that, So we take the hat home, and of course we're doing rain dances around it and all kinds of stuff. We can't believe we have Bill Monroe's hat in our apartment, So I take it down to Jew, and I said, I've got Bill Monroe. You got the father's hat there? He called him the father of Bluegrass, So he'd known him probably for 50 years,
How bad was the spot in reality? I mean, did
it was a white hat, and it
okay.
looked like I said, it looked like a big bruise on the back. And I said, Jew, I got some coffee on his hat. I said, you got to get this out of there for me. So he went to steaming and powdering and brushing, and he's working on it. And he said, how'd that look right there? I said, man, if you just work on it a little bit more, I think if you could just blend it in, And anyway, he got it pretty good. And I have a hat that Jew made. Everybody's, if you ever got one, it had a little card in it. It says, like hell it's yours, put it back. That's what, and then the bottom was his card, But if you got a hat from him, that's what it was. Now, by the way, his name was spelled J-U. And,
right.
And he had quite a history in Nashville. He'd been making hats since he was like 12 years old in Nashville. And he had the last hat maker probably in Nashville.
And the building's still there.
The building is still there, yeah. Yep.
It's some kind of art gallery or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So anyway, I took the hat back to the Opry the next weekend, and I was back in with Bill Monroe. And he said, I really appreciate you getting that fixed up for me. So 2 weeks later, I'm out with him again. And the Bluegrass boys, of course, the other guys in the band, they won't let Bill forget that I am the guy that, did this to his hat. And they say, now, Bill, that's that sorry fella got coffee on your hat. And he says to me, how much did it cost to get my hat fixed? I said, Bill, price was no object. He goes, Bill Price, why did you mention him? And I said, I didn't say Bill Price. He goes, yes, you did. And I was just like, now here we go again.
It's Banner and Company. My guest is bass player extraordinaire, Mike Bub. We'll be right back. When did you part with the banjo and why? And
well, I moved to Nashville.
Completely split from it?
I moved to Nashville with a band, and that band included the late Butch Baldessari on mandolin.
Oh, yes.
Who's been gone probably 15 years now, I guess.
His wife has the antique booth across from me.
Yes. Oh, really?
Just a little aside. Yeah.
And Chris Jones, who is has his own band and also is a DJ on Sirius Satellite on the Bluegrass Channel, and also Willie's Place. And our banjo player was Ron Block,
yes.
He's been with Alison Krauss for 30 years or 28 years, something like that. Anyway, that band was moving to Nashville. And then Ron, I had been playing bass in that band, and Ron was the banjo player. And then Ron left the band before we actually moved to Nashville. He didn't make the move with us. And so I went back to playing banjo, and we started getting other guys to fill in on bass. Got to Nashville, 1989, and, moving to Nashville at any time, as a young person, you get humbled real quick, and you realize, oh, there's a lot of people that's been here a lot longer than me that do this really well, And so, you just sort of try to assimilate into the scene here. But what happens when you move here with the band is all of a sudden there's opportunities that are, they're calling at you, or they're calling out to you from, you're inside this band and this struggle, and we're young and we're ideological and we want to do this, and then all of a sudden, you realize, oh, I could go work for these guys and, actually make money and not have to worry about all this other stuff that I deal with, like booking gigs and getting the van ready and all this other stuff. So we started to splinter apart because of these other opportunities. And that's when I started to get more work playing the bass. And I made a record with Larry Cordell and Glenn Duncan, which was their first album together, called Lonesome Standard Time. I played banjo on that. And then, but in the interim there, I had met Ronnie McCurry, and we had played a couple times with Del, and then I found out that they were moving here to Nashville. And so I really laid out to get that job on bass, and eventually it came to happen. It took about a year and a half, but finally came around. And then, once I was in that band, I was sort of in one lane, and that was it, and playing the bass. And
so when was the last time you picked a banjo?
Well, I actually bought one a couple years ago. Sonny Osborne had come up with a new sort of signature instrument that he had designed with another guy who was a young fella who was kind of his protege. Anyway, they came up with this instrument, and I thought, well, this could be the last chance for me to get a banjo from Sonny, like with his signature type model. And so I put a deposit in for it, and then 6 months later he passed away. And it took me 3 years to get it, but I finally got it last year. But the bass has kind of ruined my hands for playing the banjo.
In what way?
Well, it just takes finesse to play, get a good sound on one of those things. And my hands are just all muscled up from playing upright bass. And
what about your actual bass? Where did you find your instrument, and how in the world do you travel with something that big?
My first bass I paid $375 for. I still have it. It's been living in the basement of the Country Music Hall of Fame for about 5 years. They did a Station Inn exhibit down there, and so I gave them my first bass that I've really played a lot for 20-some years. Then eventually I started, buying some other ones. And then now traveling, I used to travel with a big giant sarcophagus that the bass would go inside. And the airline, they don't want to see that thing coming anymore. So a fellow named Charlie Chadwick, who worked for Susie Boggess for years and used to play with Jamie Hartford, among many others, great bass player. He is a mechanical and musical genius, and he came up with this idea of making a bass that would just fold into itself and go into a case and be completely self-contained and be 50 pounds to get on the airline. And so he basically changed the way that we travel with upright bass with this design, this idea. And then, as often happens with something that's very innovative like that, the next thing you know is competition grows up around you. People improve or change the idea. And so eventually I went away from that type of bass to just a bass that the neck, it bolts on and bolts off, so you can just take it off. And I use one of those cases for the body of the bass, and then the neck I put into an electric bass gig bag and use as a backpack.
Wow.
I can take it apart and put it together in about 5 minutes.
V said, I've got to ask for a John Hartford story.
Oh. One of the last times I saw John, I was over at his house with my buddy David Ferguson, and John was sitting on his porch. He was just sitting there by the river. He had his bus parked right there in front of him, and the river was there, and he was just taking on visitors when they could come over and see him, but he really couldn't play or anything. And my buddy Ferg says to him, he said, John, I think you're going to come through this. You're going to make it through this. You're going to fight this thing off. And he said, Fergie, I'm dying. He said, I'd trade my body for yours right now. He said, my body? Jesus. He said, you don't want my body. You want some young, good-looking guy that can sing. Which, I just about fell over laughing, but he was right, and he was serious, but it was just funny, And got a little grin out of Hartford for that one.
You mentioned the Station Inn, and of course, we could do an entire show, and we will do, because the 100th anniversary, or the 50th, 100th. It seems like 100 to you, probably, but the 50th. Now, it was not always at, let me see what the address was, because I wrote it down here. 405 12th Avenue South, is that right?
402 12th Avenue South is where it is now.
But not always.
But it started over off of West End at another bar, which was an odd bar because it had a wall that went down the middle of it. And there was college students on one side of the wall and, sort of adults or whatever, regular people on the other side, regular people. And it was just an odd place, but that's how they started. Basically, the Station Inn was started by musicians to have a place to play. And they were a house band. The conglomerate that actually started it was the house band as well. And so they took shifts and ran it as well. And then, so J.T. Gray bought it, and it had already moved to its new location, I believe. There was another couple of owners in between.
Its new location, which looks like something,
Yeah, now it looks like, well, I call it the last bastion of Nashville. I mean, really, all of our favorite places to hear music are gone, the old 12th and Porter, and the other one across from Zany's, Douglas Corner, all of these kind of legendary haunts for musicians and songwriters in Nashville have just kind of gone away, just through the evolution of town. But so JT, he owned it for 40 some years. He passed away 2 years ago now. And the whole neighborhood, back then it was just all industrial down there. And now there's a W Hotel, 5-star hotel right across the street from it. And it's still on that little property. But the real beauty of it all is that the people that own that building, which is Webby Plumbing, they've been in business since 1959 here in town. I think they own most of that street, including the property that the Station Inn sits on. And I think it's in everybody's best interest that it keeps going, and fortunately, JT's family entrusted it to one of his friends who's also a musician. And, as musicians, we hate change. We don't want change. We don't want anything to change. People come in the Station and go, man, if I had this place, I'd blow this out, blow this wall out, and do this. And it's like, well, then it wouldn't be this anymore. It would be something entirely different,
Yeah.
And that's one thing that it's managed to do is remain pretty much the same in spite of everything that's happened around it.
I mean, aesthetically, we talked about it, of course, but low ceilings, stone walls. But why does everything sound so great in there?
Well, in that intimate setting, everything sounds good when it's small and it's close, They have an excellent PA system in there, and I don't know, it's just, there's just something about that small room vibe, that you get. It's not just the sound, it's just the environment of it all. When you walk in that door, it's just the same as when I walked in the first time in 1982, I don't remember it being any different, covered in posters on the wall,
Well, one thing's different. Anne's not out the door.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's evolved over the years, over its 50 years, and, not much has changed. Just the faces have changed,
Let's go out with a little audio postcard from the Station Inn. Still going strong after 50 years.
This is our home.
What do you think it is about the Station Inn then?
Oh, gosh. Well, the people are so friendly. Well, I'm originally from Kentucky. People are very friendly there, but we came down here. It seems like they're even more friendly. And then the people in the country and Bluegrass, they're just like regular people. They're just like us. They're loving, they're God-fearing, they want to be your friends. And then once you're friends, then they become family too. Well, we came here one time, and then my husband was about to retire, and because of this place, we decided instead of retiring in Kentucky, we came to Nashville. Just being here one time So that's how much of an impact this place had on us. And just hearing the great music and hearing the story behind each song, like getting to know chord, and being up close and personal makes a difference. I'll never go to a big arena again.
Hold my head up and even tell myself I'm glad that you don't fall.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode was produced, edited, and mixed by Steve Haruch. Original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. Our final question is in the fishbowl.
Okay.
There's only 2 in there right now, but you can take your choice and...
Let's do the one that's buried.
Okay. Buried in the pink gravel.
Next question. From Elliot Robinson. How many
live plays or live theatrical performances have you attended in the past year in Nashville?
I can't remember the last play I went to in Nashville. I can't remember. It's been a while. But I will say this. I was in New York 2 weeks ago, and one of my best friends up there took me to see Buena Vista Social Club, the musical.
I heard about it.
And it was their 5th performance on Broadway, but, like most plays, they take it out on the road, then they bring it to Broadway when it's tightened up, and it was incredible. The band is this, full Cuban band, which is in the center. They're the centerpiece of the play, so they're on stage the whole time. It's not a pit band, and it's a real bunch of Cuban masters. And they got a guy playing the trace, which the trace is a 3-string. It's 3 doubled strings, so it's like a mandolin, but it's 3 strings instead of 8. And this guy's like a virtuoso on the thing. And so the musicians, it basically tells the story of the making of the bringing together of all these characters to make the Buena Vista Social Club album, and their backstories, all done in a theatrical way. And it was just, it's Broadway. It's like, it's the best of the best, the dancing, the costumes, and it was a very simple set, but the music was just incredible. I recommend anybody to go see it if they can go see it in New York.